New York has a way of swallowing sound. Even on a quiet night, the city hums from someplace you can't point to, steam hissing from a grate, a cab rolling through a puddle, wind tugging a ripped poster until the glue sighs and lets go. Inside Mercer and Pine, the noise of Manhattan softened into velvet, forks settling on china, a bar spoon tapping glass, the low throb of a bass line that felt like a secret. He arrived with a storm on his heels. Ethan Calder tailored charcoal suit, a watch that could pay a year's rent in Bushwick, and shoulders drawn tight enough to cut through drywall slid into the corner banquette like he owned the air above it. People knew him here. People knew him everywhere that smelled like old money and lemon oil. When a Mater D smiles with his eyes and not just his mouth, that's not friendliness, that's calculus. Ethan sparked those kinds of equations on contact. He didn't order a drink. He ordered a silence. It obeyed. Calder, the Mater D murmured, placing a leather-bound menu he didn't need onto the polished table. Your usual? Ethan gave a clipped nod. Black coffee, rye rare. No sides. He wasn't really hungry. He was buying time in a room that made failure feel theoretical. Outside, numbers were turning against him, spreadsheet cells, bleeding red. A rumor he wasn't ready to call a rumor about a bond covenant. A text from his general counsel that said we should talk tomorrow and meant prepare for a blade. Inside, the light was warm and flattering. The kind of light that forgave you for things. Ethan needed forgiving, even if he wouldn't have admitted it. She appeared at his table like a new paragraph. Good evening, she said, voice steady, not deferential. I'm Layla. I'll be taking care of you tonight. He glanced up without really seeing her. Speaking to people had become like speaking into microphones. The echoes were for other people to deal with. Still, something tripped in him, a small human stumble at the sight of her eyes. They were dark, attentive, not the performative brightness of hospitality. Real attention. People didn't look at him like that unless they wanted something. She just looked. Coffee, he said. Of course. She set a glass of water. The lemon slice tilted like a smile on the rim. And your steak? The kitchen is fast tonight. Rare, he repeated. No sides. Got it. She left, and he was alone again with his screens. Ethan didn't bring a laptop to dinner. He brought a phone that thought it was a courtroom. Messages stacked in the notification shade like witnesses lining up to contradict one another. He scrolled, jaw tight. A voice memo from Marcus Lynn, his CFO, with a subject line that could curl the edges off a page. On the bond issue, urgent. He put the phone face down and folded his hands. He had learned to be still in rooms like this. Stillness read as power. Stillness told the world you were the one who made other people move. The coffee arrived on a silver tray. It looked like a precise decision. White cup, saucer, small steel pitcher of cream he wouldn't use. Sugar cubes that might as well be diamonds from the way the light hit their edges. Layla set the tray down and reached to pour. She was careful. There was a quiet competency to the way she moved. Like someone who'd ironed shirts in the half-light of dawn and memorized the timing of buses. He noticed the bracelet on her wrist, a thin silver chain with a tiny cedar tree charm. He had seen that tree before, on a flag, on a bank's logo. In conference rooms where men who wore cufflinks spoke softly about billions. The cup tilted, time hiccuped. His phone vibrated against the table. A reflex he'd honed for a decade tugged his eyes downward just as her hand found the angle of pour. In that half-inch of divided attention, the slipperiest distance in the world, something went wrong. Coffee leaped the cup's lip. It wasn't a splash so much as a confession, the kind of mistake that arrives before anyone has a chance to catch it. A streak of black across white. A hot, slashing arc that cut across the edge of the table, the back of her hand, and then his suit. A clean line of heat across wool and pride. The noise he made wasn't loud, it was worse. A sound that said somebody's going to pay for this without committing to a decibel. Oh my God, "I'm so sorry," she said, already blotting with a cloth that seemed to appear from nowhere. Her voice didn't climb. It stayed low and practical. "Are you burned?" "Don't," he said, and the word had edges. He pulled back, slow, controlled. The way you move away from a stranger who has stepped on your shoe on a crowded subway. Except there were no strangers here, and this wasn't a subway. This was his arena. A bead of coffee slipped off the hem and dropped to the floor with a microscopic, humiliating clap. She kept blotting at the table's edge. He looked at the spreading stain like he might look at a breach in a dam. A few heads turned. Mercer and Pine didn't host many small tragedies. When they happened, everyone pretended not to care while caring very much. "I'm so sorry," she repeated. "It was my fault. I'll have seltzer and a cloth." "My jacket," he said. "Do you have any idea what this costs?" She held his gaze. "I can ask the manager to comp." "I don't need your manager," he said, and now his voice gathered volume like a wave. She paused. Her hand slender, small burn, forming a pink crescent beneath the thumb hovered above the stain. "I'll pay for the cleaning." He laughed once, a short exhale that tasted like metal. "Cleaning." Around them, conversation paused to listen to itself. "I'm truly sorry," she said again, but he heard it the way he heard apologies from interns who sent the wrong version of a deck. Form, not function. He had been raised at a table where apologies were the first course and consequences the dessert. His mind, hot with caffeine and the day's accumulating failures, reached for a lever he'd pulled in other rooms where Arabic was the oxygen. Sovereign wealth funds in conference suites with carpeting soft as rain, coffee poured from long-necked brass pots, jasmine in the air. He wasn't fluent, not really. But he was fluent enough in the power of understanding what other people didn't think you did. Fluent in the way language could be a private room you locked from the inside. He looked at her bracelet against the cedar tree. It made something mean in him move. Without thinking, perhaps because he'd spent all day thinking in numbers and needed a cruelty that didn't require mathy switch tongues. His face softened into a smile that wasn't a smile. He murmured, almost pleasantly, the syllables sliding like oil. "Look at the clever one. Can't pour a cup of coffee, but you can shine a table. Stick to your job." It wasn't the worst thing a man could say. It was the smallness of it that did damage. The way it tucked contempt into a pocket where he assumed no one would look. She froze. Not entirely. It was subtler than that. A tiny stillness, like the moment an elevator stops but the doors haven't opened yet. Her eyes, those attentive eyes, flicked to his, then to his mouth, as if confirming that the words had, in fact, come from there. She set the cloth down carefully. The burn on her hand deepened a shade. Someone across the room laughed at something else entirely, and the laugh hung for a second in the wrong place, like a picture frame knocked crooked. Ethan felt an aftertaste of satisfaction. The kind of satisfaction that wasn't really about anyone else. The kind that made him feel like he'd tightened a loose screw inside himself. A tiny voice he kept in a locked drawer asked, "Why did you do that?" He ignored it. He had ignored it so long it sounded like an appliance in a neighbor's apartment, always on, never his problem. Layla picked up the silver tray. For a heartbeat, her fingers trembled, not with fear, with restraint. It was a tremble the way a bowstring trembles when an archer chooses not to release. "Would you like me to get the manager?" She asked softly, in English, as if nothing else had been said at all. He waved a hand, dismissive. The ring on his finger flashed, a constellation of board votes and leveraged assets. No, the manager was already approaching, eyes cutting a path across the floor. Ethan saw it in his periphery and felt a spasm of annoyance. He didn't want a scene, he wanted control. He always wanted control. "Is everything all right here?" the manager asked, voice pitched so professionally it might have been ironed. Layla didn't answer. Not yet. She was looking at Ethan, really looking now, and he realized too late that he had misunderstood the look from the beginning. It wasn't the look of a person performing service. It was the look of a person taking measure. A party of 4 at the next table murmured, then went deliberately silent. The room's music kept playing, but it sounded farther away, as if the speakers had been moved down the hall. Ethan lifted his napkin and dabbed at the line of coffee. The stain had already set, light brown on charcoal, a bruise that would deepen by morning. He told himself it didn't matter. He told himself a lot of things that had stopped being true. He reached for his phone, the device singing again with thoughts from other rooms. A text hovered on the lock screen like a superimposed future. "Heads up, we lost Dubai. Call me." Ethan's stomach flipped. Dubai wasn't just a client. Dubai was oxygen. He swiped the message away without opening it, as if not reading it was a spell he could cast to keep the news untrue a little longer. He realized, dimly, that the insult he'd chosen hadn't been random. He had aimed it not at her, but at the part of himself that feared being shut out of rooms where Arabic was the air, and had let her catch the blow for him. Memar called her. The manager tried again, more tentative. "We can take your jacket to be treated. And of course your meal is—" "I said it's fine," Ethan snapped, the syllables snapping his control in two. Heads turned. Layla's face didn't change, but something in her posture did, a relaxation, a surrender he couldn't recognize yet for what it was, resolve. She glanced at the bracelet, touched the tiny cedar with her thumb as if checking it was still there. When she looked up, her eyes were calm water over deep stone. "Excuse me," she said, to the manager, to the room, to herself. Then she turned back to Ethan and leaned in, just enough that he could see the pale new crescent of burn beneath her thumb and smell the faint sweetness of something like orange blossom on her skin, or memory playing tricks on a man who had not thought of gardens in a very long time. What she said next would unspool the night. It would unspool him. Her lips parted, and in the language he thought would hide him, she began to speak for a heartbeat. The room forgot to breathe. Ethan's pulse drummed in his throat, though his expression stayed frozen, the face of a man used to bluffing through disaster. Layla stood perfectly still, holding the silver tray against her hip like a shield. Every whisper in Mercer and Pine thinned to nothing. And then she spoke. "The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice." The vowels had the warm lilt of Beirut and the steady precision of someone educated on both sides of the ocean. Around them, forks stopped mid-air. Someone's glass touched the table too hard and chimed. Even the bartender, polishing glasses at the counter, froze mid-motion. Every ear tilted toward their corner, pretending not to. Layla didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She took one quiet step closer, eyes steady. "The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice." It was disappointment, a mirror he didn't want to look into. Layla switched to English, her voice a quiet thread cutting through the thick silence. "I came to this country when I was 8. My father taught me Arabic so I wouldn't forget where I came from. I didn't think I'd ever need it to defend myself in a restaurant." A ripple moved through the nearby tables. Not laughter, not pity, just awareness. Ethan felt the air shift against his skin. He could feel eyes on him, measuring, enjoying the rare sight of a billionaire caught off guard. He started to speak, but the words tangled. "Miss Layla, She lifted a hand gently, not rudely, just enough to stop him. "Please don't. It's okay. You've probably had a bad day." Her voice softened, but the softness wasn't forgiveness. It was control. Everyone slips. "Just maybe next time. Don't assume the person you're talking about doesn't understand you." She gave a small, professional smile, the kind servers practice to survive humiliation without leaving bruises on their dignity, and turned away. The silver tray caught the light as she walked back toward the kitchen, every step quiet, but echoing in Ethan's mind like a gavel. He sat there, motionless, pulse roaring in his ears. The manager hovered beside him, uncertain. "Would you like me to send someone else to your table, Mr. Calder?" Ethan didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the dark doorway where Layla had disappeared. Something uncomfortable, something foreign, stirred in his chest. It wasn't shame, not exactly. Shame required acknowledgement. This was awareness, the slow, uneasy realization that the power he'd spent a lifetime mastering had limits. He reached for his napkin again, then stopped halfway. His hand was trembling. He hid it under the table. A few minutes later, she returned, professional, composed, eyes betraying nothing. She set a fresh cup of coffee on the table, careful, exact, silent. Ethan wanted to say something, an apology, a joke, anything, but his mouth felt wired shut. When she turned to leave, he said, "Layla, wait." She paused, looked at him. "Yes, sir?" He cleared his throat. "I shouldn't have said that." She tilted her head, studying him for a moment. "Thank you." Then gently, "Words have weight, Mr. Calder, especially from people the world listens to." She left again, this time without looking back. The rest of the meal tasted like penance. He didn't finish it. Couldn't. When the check arrived, it came with a note, written in looping, elegant handwriting. For the suit cleaning and for the lesson. Folded inside was a $100 bill. Ethan stared at it, at first in disbelief, then in quiet, rising shame. The billionaire being compensated by the waitress, a reversal so absurd it almost felt biblical. He left the bill on the table, untouched, and stepped into the cold Manhattan night. The city's lights blinked at him like judgment. His phone vibrated again, another message from Marcus, his CFO. "Call me ASAP, we're in trouble." Major investors pulling out. Ethan looked up at the skyscrapers glowing against the dark sky, each window a square of power he'd once thought permanent. For the first time in years, they looked fragile. He slipped the phone into his pocket and walked into the wind, Layla's words still burning through the armor he wore around his soul. The morning didn't greet Ethan Calder, it cornered him. Sunlight bled through the glass walls of his penthouse like a confession he couldn't dodge. His phone buzzed before he even opened his eyes. Then again, then again. Each vibration, another small earthquake in the empire he'd built on control. When he finally looked, the screen was a battlefield. Marcus Lin, Dubai Fund pulled out. Singapore might follow, PR, rumor hit Bloomberg. Need statement ASAP. Legal, SEC wants preliminary documents. It's serious. Ethan sat up, the sheets creasing around him like evidence. His throat was dry. He reached for the glass of water on his nightstand, but stopped halfway. His hand was still trembling, just like it had last night at the restaurant. He exhaled sharply, annoyed at his own weakness. He opened the curtains. Manhattan sprawled below, hard, glittering, indifferent. The kind of view that once made him feel invincible. This morning, it just made him feel small. He turned on the news. His name wasn't in the headline yet, but it was circling the drain. Anonymous sources talked about accounting irregularities, liquidity concerns, and investor mistrust. The financial pundits were sharpening their knives, dressing it all up in the language of inevitability. He muted the screen. The silence hit harder. On the marble counter, his untouched coffee from the machine had gone cold. A small dark pool, bitter and useless. He stared at it for too long, remembering the waitress, her calm eyes, the sound of her voice saying, "Don't assume everyone is deaf to your language." He shook it off. That wasn't his problem right now. He threw on a suit, dark navy, armor in fabric form, and took the private elevator down to the garage. The driver tried to say good morning, but Ethan's eyes were already locked on his phone, scrolling through messages, each one worse than the last. At the office, the moment he stepped into Calder Holdings, he knew the air had changed. It was subtle, but he could feel it. People speaking in lower tones, glancing up when they thought he wouldn't notice, then snapping their eyes back to screens. The receptionist smiled too quickly. The way people smile at funerals, he didn't return it. "Marcus," he said as soon as he reached his office. "On my way," came the voice through the intercom, tight, exhausted. The office itself was an architectural ego trip, 30 floors up, all glass and polished steel. The skyline behind him was supposed to look like victory. Today it looked like judgment. Marcus arrived with a laptop tucked under one arm and a folder in the other. He was younger than Ethan by 10 years, sharp, loyal, or at least had been until loyalty stopped being convenient. Ethan didn't offer him a seat. "Tell me everything," Marcus hesitated. "You're not gonna like it. Try me." He set the laptop on the table and opened the financial dashboard. Graphs plunged, numbers bled. It looked like a slow-motion car crash dressed up in spreadsheets. 3 funds pulled out since midnight. One of them's the Al-Khalidi Group. That's 200 million gone. Rumor is someone leaked the internal memo about the bond rollovers. SEC wants to see the books. Ethan's jaw clenched. "Leak came from inside?" Marcus nodded grimly. "Has to be. No one else had access." Ethan exhaled through his nose. "Find them." Marcus gave a short, humorless laugh. "Working on it." But that's not the biggest issue. He clicked to another tab, a spreadsheet labeled Foreign Assets, Subsidiaries. Rows of red highlighted cells glared up at Ethan. Some of the offshore accounts? They're messy. Missing documentation. Transfers routed through shell partners that no one can trace. Ethan looked up sharply. "That's impossible." "Everything went through compliance." Marcus hesitated. "Compliance reports to your coup, remember? And your coup hasn't shown up today." Ethan's stomach turned to stone. He lowered himself into the chair. The city stretched behind him, perfectly framed. The illusion of control now mocking him. "How bad?" he asked quietly. Marcus's voice dropped. "Bad enough that if this goes public, we're not talking fines. We're talking criminal." Hours bled into each other. Calls stacked, lawyers stammered, analysts panicked. The empire that once bent to Ethan's will now demanded explanations he didn't have. He signed documents, barked orders, tried to plug holes in a ship already halfway underwater. By evening, the sunset poured red across the glass walls, an omen wearing disguise. Ethan sat there in the fading light, his reflection split by the window's glare, one half powerful, one half terrified. He loosened his tie. His phone buzzed again, a new message from a private contact labeled simply, Khalidi. "We trusted you. My father trusted you. You embarrassed us." Ethan's heart stuttered. The Al-Khalidi Fund, the same people who had built his early success, the same ones he'd met in Dubai, sipping coffee poured from brass pots in rooms perfumed with jasmine and power. It hit him like a slap, the language, the insult. The one he'd thrown at Layla the night before, careless, arrogant, in the same tongue that had opened doors for him in those rooms. And now that same world was closing its doors. Hard, he stood abruptly, pacing. His voice echoed off the glass. How did it come to this? He muttered, "How?" But he knew it wasn't just a leak. It was rot, the kind that starts with small, comfortable cruelties, the kind he practiced daily without noticing. The way he spoke to assistants, waiters, partners. "Layla, you can't build an empire on disrespect and expect the foundation to hold." The office emptied by 10. Ethan stayed behind, city lights flickering like restless thoughts outside. His desk was covered in half-empty water bottles, cold coffee, and resignation papers he hadn't read. He loosened his tie completely and slumped into the chair. His phone buzzed one last time. Marcus again. "Marcus, I'm sorry, Ethan. They're calling an emergency board meeting in the morning. Without you." For the first time in years, Ethan Calder didn't know what to do. He sat there, alone, staring out at the city, the one he'd conquered, the one now watching him fall. The hum of the elevator echoed down the empty corridor like a heartbeat. Somewhere deep in his chest, past the arrogance and the armor, something old and human began to ache. He thought of Layla again. The steadiness in her eyes. The quiet way she'd spoken truth without venom. Words have weight, Mr. Calder. He looked down at the coffee stain, still faintly marking his sleeve. A dark bruise that refused to wash away. He stayed in that chair until the skyline faded from silver to black, and the only light left was the cold blue glow of a city that had already moved on without him. Tomorrow he would face the board. Tomorrow the fall would be complete. It had been 4 days since Ethan Calder's empire started bleeding. 4 days since the board had locked him out of his own company email. 4 days since Marcus stopped returning his calls. 4 days since his name, Calder Holdings collapse, began its slow parade through every business network ticker in the country. He'd spent those days in the silence of his penthouse, a cathedral built for a god who'd lost his worshippers. The TV talked to itself, analysts dissecting his downfall with the glee of vultures who'd finally been invited to the feast. He tried to drink, but alcohol just stretched the ache thinner. He tried to sleep, but guilt kept tugging him awake. By day 4, he hadn't eaten a proper meal since the night of the coffee spill. Maybe that's what drove him back there. Or maybe it was something else, something quieter. A pull he didn't understand. Mercer and Pine again. It was late afternoon when he pushed open the glass door. The restaurant was nearly empty, sunlight spilling in through the tall windows like forgiveness auditioning for a role. The same lemon oil scent, the same soft jazz, the same corner table waiting for someone who wasn't the same man anymore. The Mater D looked startled. Calder, we haven't seen you in. Table for one, Ethan said, voice low. Same as last time. The Mater D hesitated, then nodded. Of course. He gestured to a table, not the exact one, but close enough. Ethan sat down, his reflection stretched in the silverware. He didn't want to admit it, but part of him was hoping she'd be there. Maybe just to say the words he hadn't managed to say properly. When she appeared, balancing a tray of plates for another table, it hit him like déjà vu wrapped in regret. Layla, hair tied back the same way, that same calm gravity in her movements. But now he noticed things he hadn't before. The faint burn mark healed over her thumb, the tired grace in the way she smiled at each customer. There was no bitterness in her, just an unshakable poise that made him feel smaller for losing his own. She didn't see him at first. Then, as she turned toward the counter, her eyes met his. And everything paused again, just like that first night. Recognition flickered. Then something else, surprise, maybe curiosity, but not hostility. She walked over slowly, balancing professionalism with caution. Mr. Calder, she said, tone even. I didn't expect to see you again. He tried to return the smile, but it landed crooked. Neither did I. What can I get you? Just coffee, he said. Black. A small smile touched her mouth. Still no cream? He almost laughed, almost. Still no cream. She nodded and turned toward the counter. He watched her move, the rhythm of her steps strangely grounding. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt like a person sitting in a room, not a name in a headline. When she came back with the cup, he cleared his throat. Layla, can I say something before you go? She paused, hands still on the tray. Sure, he exhaled. About the other night, I was out of line. What I said was unacceptable. I don't have an excuse, but I'm sorry. She studied him quietly. You already said that before I walked away. I know, he said, voice rough. But I didn't mean it then the way I do now. Double quotes, something softened in her expression. What changed? He gave a short, humorless laugh. Everything, he told her, not everything, but enough. The scandal, the betrayal, the feeling of losing control. He didn't dramatize it. His tone was weary, almost matter of fact. I built a company that was supposed to last forever. Turns out forever has a short lease. Layla listened. She didn't interrupt, didn't pity him. She simply listened with the same focus she'd had that first night. When he finished, she said softly, "Sometimes it has to fall apart to show you what it was made of." He looked at her, genuinely curious. "And what was mine made of?" She shrugged lightly. "Maybe the wrong kind of strength. That hit harder than any headline." He nodded slowly, as if filing away the truth. "You're not wrong." They sat in silence for a moment. Two people on opposite sides of a broken world, both somehow sitting in the same light. When she turned to leave again, he asked, "Layla, can I ask you something? You speak Arabic beautifully. Where'd you learn?" She smiled faintly. "My father. He was a financial analyst back home, worked for a multinational company before we moved here. He taught me the language of numbers first, then of people." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Finance? Which company?" Her smile faded, almost imperceptibly. "You probably wouldn't remember. It was years ago. The firm went under after a merger with Calder Holdings." The words fell between them like a dropped plate. Soft sound, sharp impact. Ethan froze. "Your father worked for me?" "Indirectly. He was part of a small consulting group your firm acquired in 2011. They promised him a position after the buyout, but the division was shut down. He lost everything. We had to start over here." Her tone wasn't angry, it was factual. But that calmness carried more weight than accusation ever could. Ethan sat back, a slow nausea rising. "Layla, I didn't know." "I'm sure you didn't," she said gently. "People like my father don't usually make it to your radar." He wanted to say something, anything, but his mouth stayed dry. Every word he'd ever used to defend himself suddenly felt like currency without value. She gave a small shrug. "It's okay. It's not about revenge. He's doing better now. Teaches economics at a community college in Queens." Ethan swallowed hard. "I'm glad," she nodded. "You should be." For a long moment, they just looked at each other, not as Billionaire and Waitress, but as two fragments of the same story that had finally collided. Ethan reached into his jacket and placed a card on the table. His name embossed in silver, but his voice was quiet, stripped of power. "Layla, if I wanted to make things right, not just with you, with him, would you help me? Or at least tell me where to start?" She hesitated. "Why me?" "Because," he said, "you're the only person who's told me the truth in months." The honesty in his tone caught her off guard. She looked at the card, then back at him. "I don't know if I can help you," she said softly, "but I'll think about it." He nodded. "That's all I can ask." She turned to leave, but stopped halfway. "You still take your coffee black, Mr. Calder. Maybe that's the first thing you should change." And with that, she walked away, leaving Ethan staring into the dark liquid that reflected a version of himself he was only now beginning to meet. Ethan Calder had spent a lifetime convincing people that silence meant control. But in the days after his second encounter with Layla, silence just meant fear. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. His phone, once a source of command, now pulsed with chaos. Lawyers, board members, journalists. Every message started with, "We regret to inform you," or "We need your statement." But there was one number that didn't appear on his screen. Hers. He hadn't expected her to call. People didn't usually return to the fire after they'd been burned. Still, part of him, the part that still believed in clean slates, kept checking. Until one cold Thursday morning, she did. The call came at 8:47 a.m. He was staring at a spreadsheet he no longer understood when the unknown number flashed across his screen. He hesitated and then answered. "Mr. Calder?" Her voice, steady, clear. He straightened in his chair instinctively, though no one could see him. "Layla, I thought about what you said," she continued. "About wanting to make things right. I meant it," he said quickly. Every word. She paused, as if measuring the weight of his sincerity. There's a cafe on West 57th, near the park. Quiet. Meet me there at noon? He exhaled, relief and anxiety tangled together. I'll be there. Café Dar El Noor, Midtown Manhattan. It was a modest place, tucked between glass towers like a secret the city hadn't paved over yet. The scent of cardamom and roasted beans drifted through the air, warm and familiar. Arabic calligraphy curved across the wall like poetry, and a single radio played Fairuz softly, the kind of music that turned space into memory. Layla was already there when he arrived. No uniform this time. Just jeans, a cream sweater, and that same quiet strength. She looked like someone who belonged in both worlds, the old and the new, and maybe that's why she unnerved him. Didn't think you'd actually come, she said with a faint smile. I don't usually take advice from people who insult me back, he said, trying for humor. It fell flat. She smirked. Maybe that's your first problem. He ordered coffee, this time with cream. She noticed and didn't comment, but her eyes softened. After a pause, she said, I spoke to my father last night. Ethan tensed. He hates me, doesn't he? She shook her head. He doesn't hate you. He doesn't even know you. He hates what your company did to people like him. People who worked hard, trusted promises, and got crushed in mergers made by men they'd never meet. He swallowed. Fair. He said something though, she continued. He said, if the man truly wants to fix what he broke, don't stop him. The world needs more of that. Single quotes. Ethan looked at her. So you're here because of your father? No, she said. I'm here because I think he's right. She pulled a small notebook from her bag and flipped it open. It was filled with figures, charts, hand-drawn diagrams, notes scrawled in a neat, efficient hand. I've been following the news, she said. Your company's in free fall because of insider manipulation. Someone on your executive board orchestrated this, likely to force you out. But from what I've seen, the numbers don't add up. It's not just bad luck, Ethan. Someone wanted this to happen. He blinked. How do you know that? She turned the notebook toward him. Because I used to do this for a living. Before the merger, her confidence was quiet, but absolute. She flipped to a chart showing suspicious transaction trails. I've tracked some of your public filings. The inconsistencies point to a single internal source, your coup, Brandon Hales. Offshore accounts in Dubai, Cayman, Zurich. He's been moving assets under a subsidiary that technically no longer exists. Ethan leaned in, scanning the data. She was right. Every detail aligned with the whispers Marcus had mentioned before he disappeared. You did this on your own? He asked, incredulous. She nodded. Numbers don't lie. People do. He looked at her for a long moment, awe creeping in. I can't believe this. You found what my own auditors missed. Her expression stayed neutral. Maybe they didn't miss it. Maybe they just weren't looking. He sat back, absorbing the weight of her words. So what do you suggest? You want to save Calder Holdings? She asked. Yes. Then you need to rebuild it, not from the boardroom, but from the ground up. Cut the corruption, expose what's hidden, and face the public before they face you. He laughed quietly, though it wasn't a happy sound. You make it sound easy. It's not, she said simply. But it's honest. There was a pause, the kind that feels like the start of something dangerous and necessary. Ethan studied her. You're offering to help me. I'm offering perspective, she corrected. Not forgiveness. I'll take either. She smiled faintly, shaking her head. You're still charming when you shouldn't be. He hesitated. Layla, if you came on board, even temporarily, I could bring you in as a consultant. Full pay, full authority to dig. No interference. I'll back every decision you make. She stared at him, weighing the sincerity in his eyes. You're serious. Completely. She leaned back, thoughtful. If I do this, I have conditions. Name them. 1, she said firmly. No lies. Not to the media, not to your team, not to me. You tell the truth, even when it makes you look bad. He nodded. Agreed. 2. No cover-ups. If we find something illegal, we expose it. No exceptions. He hesitated, then quietly, agreed. And 3. She smiled, just a little. You take your coffee with cream, every day. It's a reminder you can change your mind. He laughed genuinely, this time. It felt strange, like remembering a language he'd forgotten how to speak. Deal, he said. She closed her notebook. All right then, Mr. Calder, let's save your company. They left the cafe together, sunlight glinting off the glass towers above. For the first time in weeks, Ethan didn't feel like a man waiting for the world to collapse. He felt like someone climbing back towards something real. As they stepped into the street, she said softly, "You know, when you first insulted me, I thought you were just another man who hides behind his language. And now?" She looked at him. "Now I think you're trying to learn a new one." He smiled, humbled. "Then teach me." She nodded toward the crosswalk, light changing from red to green. Lesson 1, humility walks first. And together, they crossed. The first day Layla walked into Calder Holdings, the building seemed to tilt under its own history. 30 floors of glass, steel, and whispers. Once a monument to power, now a tower haunted by panic. Ethan met her in the lobby. Gone was the arrogance that used to announce him before he even entered a room. His tie was loose, his eyes tired, but for the first time, he looked human. "Ready?" he asked. "Are you?" She countered. He smiled faintly. Not even close. They took the private elevator up. The mirrored walls reflected 2 versions of them. The man who'd built an empire of silence, and the woman who'd learned to turn silence into strength. Neither spoke. The elevator hummed like a heartbeat, trying to remember its rhythm. Inside the boardroom, when the doors opened, the temperature dropped. Half a dozen executives turned to look, shark-scenting blood in the water. At the head of the table sat Brandon Hales, the coup. Late 40s, immaculate suit, the smile of a man who'd learned to weaponize politeness. He rose slowly, spreading his hands. "Ethan, you should have called before showing up. The board well, we thought you were taking time." His gaze slid toward Layla. "And this must be your assistant?" Ethan's voice was calm but cold. "Consultant. Financial forensic analyst." Layla met Brandon's eyes without flinching. "And the reason you'll want to start telling the truth." A few murmurs rippled around the table. Brandon's smile thinned. "Excuse me?" Layla placed a folder on the table and opened it, revealing printouts, charts, and wire transfer records. "These are shell transfers from subsidiaries you controlled. Offshore accounts tied to addresses that don't exist. And before you deny it," she slid a photo forward, "here's the signature authorizing them, yours." Brandon's jaw tightened. "Where did you get this?" "Public filings," Layla said smoothly. "And a few internal leaks from people who still care about integrity." Ethan's gaze flicked between them, his chest tightening. Layla was calm, composed, unflinching, while Brandon's polished facade began to crack. Brandon chuckled, though it sounded forced. "This is nonsense. Those are legitimate vendor payments." Layla turned another page. "Then maybe you can explain why these vendors share routing numbers with a Cayman-based holding named Icarus Investments, registered under your brother-in-law's name." The silence was a blade. Every eye in the room turned toward Brandon. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low. "Is it true?" Brandon's mask slipped for the first time. "Ethan, listen, this is business. You know how things work. Everyone benefits and no one gets hurt. No one except the hundreds of employees who lose their jobs when this goes public," Ethan said. "No one except the people who trusted us." Brandon leaned forward, sneering. "You're preaching morality now. You built this machine, Ethan. You taught us how to win at any cost." Layla glanced at Ethan, watching the words land. Brandon was right, in a way that hurt more than any accusation could. Ethan inhaled sharply. "Maybe I did. And that's why it ends with me." He stood, voice rising, not in anger, but conviction. "I'm calling for an emergency audit. Full transparency. Every account, every deal, every off-book transfer. If I go down for this, it won't be for protecting liars." Brandon's smile vanished. "You can't do that." "The board." "I am the board," Ethan said, slamming his hand on the table. "At least for now." After the meeting, they walked out to the hallway. Ethan's hands were shaking, not from fear, but adrenaline. He leaned against the wall, exhaling hard. Layla handed him a small water bottle. "You did good." He let out a dry laugh. "I think I just declared war." "You didn't start it," she said. "You just stopped pretending it wasn't happening." He looked at her, really looked. "How do you stay so calm?" She smiled faintly. "My father always said numbers are like people. They'll tell you everything if you just listen without judgment." He nodded slowly. "Maybe I should have hired you 10 years ago." "You wouldn't have listened," she said, half smiling. "Fair." That evening by nightfall, news had already started to leak. The audit announcement, the allegations of internal fraud. Reporters camped outside the building. Investors demanded answers. But for the first time, Ethan didn't hide. He stood in front of cameras, Layla beside him, and told the truth. He admitted oversight, promised reform, refused to name scapegoats. The press called it corporate suicide. But the public, the everyday people, who'd lost jobs and pensions because of men like him, they saw something else: honesty. As they left the conference room, Ethan turned to Layla. "You think it'll be enough?" "Not yet," she said. "But it's a start." Later that night, they worked from his office, long after everyone had gone. The skyline glowed against the glass, the city never sleeping, never forgiving. Layla sat across from him, laptop open, scanning transaction logs. Ethan watched her fingers fly across the keyboard. Her focus was relentless, her intelligence almost frightening. "You know," he said quietly, "you're not like anyone I've ever met." She didn't look up. "That's good. You've been meeting the wrong kind of people." He smiled faintly. "You really think we can save this company?" She stopped typing and looked at him. "I don't know. But I think we can save you." The words landed heavier than she intended. Her eyes softened, and she looked away quickly. Ethan didn't reply. He just nodded, grateful, humbled, uncertain. A quiet moment passed between them, filled with the hum of computers and the faint thrum of the city below. Two people from opposite worlds, sitting shoulder to shoulder in the wreckage of one man's pride, trying to rebuild something honest. Outside, thunder rumbled, faint but approaching. The storm was far from over, because what neither of them knew yet was that Brandon Hales wasn't done fighting, and he was about to strike back, hard. Rain always made New York feel honest. It stripped the polish off everything: glass, steel, pride. By the time the storm hit that night, the city seemed to be mourning something it couldn't name. Ethan Calder stood by the window of his office, watching droplets chase each other down the glass. His reflection looked older, not just tired, changed. Behind him, Layla was still typing, her face illuminated by the glow of a dozen monitors pulling data from the company's servers. "Last transfer went through 6 weeks ago," she said. "That's the final piece. Brandon's been funneling money through subsidiaries in the Emirates. He's good, too good, but not invisible." Ethan turned toward her. "Can we prove it?" She nodded. "We can now." For the first time in days, he smiled. A small, fragile thing, but real. The betrayal the elevator dinged. Footsteps echoed down the hall, hurried, heavy, confident. Then the door burst open. Brandon Hales, soaked from the rain, suit clinging, rage simmering behind his eyes. "Ethan," he said, breathless. "We need to talk." Layla rose from her chair, protective instinct kicking in. "You shouldn't be here." He ignored her. "You called the press. You threw your own board under the bus. You think you can walk away clean?" Ethan met his gaze. You stole millions from our investors. You sold out the people who trusted us. Brandon laughed bitterly. You mean yourself. Don't pretend this is about morality. You built a company that taught us greed was survival. Layla's voice cut through the tension. Maybe he did, but he's trying to change. Brandon's eyes narrowed. And you, what are you? His conscience? His redemption project? He stepped closer, sneering. You really think this man can change? You should see what he did to your father's division, the layoffs, the lies, the cover stories. Layla froze. You what? Brandon smirked. Oh, he didn't tell you? Calder Holdings didn't just merge your father's company. They gutted it. Ethan signed the order himself. The words hit the room like shrapnel. Ethan's breath caught. That's not true, isn't it? Brandon said, pulling a file from his briefcase and tossing it on the desk. Inside, a copy of the acquisition order. Ethan's signature, unmistakable, printed in bold black ink. Layla stared at it as if the paper itself might burn her hands. Her voice was quiet, but shaking. You knew? Ethan stepped forward. Layla, I don't remember signing. Don't remember? Her tone cracked. This wasn't some rounding error, Ethan. This ruined lives. My father's life. Brandon smiled, satisfied. There's your hero. The man who taught us all how to win. Ethan's face paled, his throat locked. Layla, I swear to you, I didn't know the details. The board pushed that through. It was years ago. I wasn't. She raised a hand, silencing him. You were in charge. The silence between them hurt more than shouting ever could. Brandon took a step toward the door, smug. You're both finished. The board's already meeting to strip you of control, Ethan. By morning, you're a headline, the disgraced billionaire who tried to play saint. Ethan clenched his jaw. You really think you'll get away with it? Brandon smiled. I already have. He turned to leave, but Layla moved first. Her voice was ice. You didn't wipe your tracks carefully enough. He stopped mid-step. Every transfer, every fake vendor, it's all mirrored on backup servers. You deleted the originals, but you forgot the automated financial redundancy system you helped implement 5 years ago. The one Calder Holdings still owns. Ethan blinked, realization dawning. Layla stepped forward, holding up a small flash drive. It's all here, every transaction, every signature. You're done, Brandon. The color drained from his face. You wouldn't. Oh, I would, she said calmly. Not for revenge. For justice. He lunged forward, but Ethan intercepted him, grabbing his arm and forcing him back. Years of gym work and adrenaline made it quick. Brandon struggled, then stopped, breathing hard, drenched, beaten. Security rushed in moments later. Ethan didn't look away as they escorted Brandon out, shouting, cursing, disappearing down the corridor. When the door shut, the silence felt infinite. After the war, Layla stood by the desk, staring at the folder, the one with Ethan's old signature. He approached slowly. Layla, I don't, she said, voice brittle. Please. He swallowed. You have every right to hate me. She looked up, eyes glistening but steady. I don't hate you, Ethan. I just don't know who you are. He hesitated. Neither do I. The admission broke something open between them, a kind of fragile honesty that felt heavier than guilt. She closed the folder slowly. Do you know what my father used to say about forgiveness? He shook his head. He said it's not about pretending it didn't happen. It's about deciding it doesn't own you anymore. Her voice softened. I'm not there yet. But I want to be. Ethan nodded. Then I'll wait. Public reckoning the next morning. Headlines exploded. Calder Holdings exposes internal corruption. Coup. Arrested for embezzlement. Whistleblower teen leads to corporate reform. From scandal to transparency. Ethan Calder's unlikely turnaround. The footage of Ethan's confession and Layla's data presentation spread online. For once, the billionaire wasn't the villain. He wasn't the hero, either. Just a man trying to make things right. When reporters asked who had uncovered the fraud, Ethan answered simply, "A woman who reminded me that power means nothing without conscience." Late that night, the storm had passed. The city smelled of wet asphalt and renewal. Layla found herself standing outside Calder Holdings, looking up at the glass tower that had nearly consumed both of them. She almost didn't go in, but something told her closure was waiting upstairs. Ethan was still in his office, lights dimmed, staring at the skyline. When he saw her, he stood quickly. "I didn't think you'd come. I almost didn't," she admitted. "But unfinished things keep me awake." He nodded. "Me too." She handed him the flash drive. "Evidence is secure. Brandon's finished. You should be proud." He took it gently, as if it were fragile. "None of this would have happened without you." She met his eyes. "Then do something with it. Make it count." He hesitated. "Will you stay? Help rebuild?" Layla smiled softly. "Maybe, but not as your consultant, as your equal." Ethan smiled, humbled. "Deal." They stood there for a moment, the city alive beneath them. Two people who'd started as enemies, now linked by truth and consequence. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Layla, I signed something that destroyed your father's world. But somehow, you're the one saving mine." She shook her head. "I'm not saving your world, Eden. I'm helping you build a new one." The weeks that followed felt like a long exhale after years of holding his breath. Ethan Calder woke early every morning, not to chase headlines or stock prices, but to watch the sunrise spill across the skyline like a promise he didn't deserve, but was learning to accept. For the first time in his life, the world wasn't about winning. It was about repairing. Calder Holdings was still standing, but it wasn't the same company anymore. Half the board was gone. The marble lobbies were quieter, humbler. Gone were the gold nameplates, the unspoken arrogance, the air of fear. In its place came something new, hope threaded through hard lessons. Layla walked those halls beside him now, not as an outsider, not as a consultant. She belonged there. The staff noticed her calm presence, the way she listened before speaking, the way Ethan actually listened when she did. The change in him was subtle but visible, his stride slower, his tone softer. He said thank you now, two words that had once felt foreign in his mouth. They spent long hours rebuilding what had fallen apart, poring over plans, drafting new ethics policies, redirecting funds to employee benefits and community outreach. Ethan didn't just want to restore his empire. He wanted to make it worthy of being restored. Sometimes, late at night, he'd catch Layla studying old ledgers or tapping her pen against her notebook, lost in thought. "What are you thinking?" He'd ask. "That this feels strange," she'd say. "Watching someone like you try so hard to be good." And he'd smile, not offended. "Trying's the least I can do." Her laughter came easier now. It wasn't the nervous laugh of a waitress balancing plates. It was lighter, freer, like someone stepping into sunlight after a long winter. The news cycle eventually moved on. The scandals lost their teeth. Investors returned, cautiously at first, then with faith. People started to believe in the company again, not because of its wealth, but because of its honesty. A miracle, some said. Ethan called it Layla. One evening, as winter began to melt into spring, they stood together on the roof of the building. The air was cold enough to bite, but clear enough to see forever. The city glittered below them, full of second chances. "I spoke to my father today," Layla said. Ethan turned to her. "How is he?" "He saw the interview you did," she said. "He said you sounded sincere. Did he forgive me?" She smiled softly. "He said forgiveness isn't something you give once. It's something you practice." "He's willing to practice." Ethan nodded, his throat tightening. "He's a better man than I am." "No," she said quietly. "He's just had more time to learn what you're learning now." The wind carried silence between them, gentle and clean. Ethan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small wrapped in tissue paper. He hesitated, then offered it to her. She unwrapped it slowly, a tiny silver cedar tree charm, identical to the one she always wore. Only this one was engraved at the base with a single word, integrity. Her eyes glistened. "You didn't have to." "I know," he said. "But I wanted to. You once said words have weight. I figured the right one should too." She smiled, closing her hand around it. "Thank you, Ethan." He met her gaze. "You taught me that power isn't what you have. It's how you treat the people who can't fight back. I'll spend the rest of my life trying not to forget that." The wind picked up, brushing through her hair. "Then I'd say you finally speak the right language." He smiled. "Which one's that?" "Human." For a moment, neither spoke. The city hummed below them, lights flickering like a pulse. He turned to look at her, and realized that for the first time in his life, he wasn't performing. He wasn't calculating. He was just there, present, alive. Downstairs, the new company logo gleamed on the building's facade. Beneath the name Calder and Hatted Group were 3 simple words chosen by both of them: truth, respect, renewal. As the last light of evening slipped behind the skyline, Ethan said quietly in Arabic, "Thank you, Layla." She looked up, surprised, then smiled. "Your accent's getting better. I've had a good teacher." The wind softened. Somewhere far below, the city began another night of endless noise and possibility. But up there, high above it all, the two of them stood in stillness, no longer billionaire and waitress, no longer past and punishment. Just two people who had finally learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do with a broken life is use it to heal someone else's. And for the first time in a very long time, Ethan Calder felt what money had never bought him: peace.